What if I told you that the way we treat chronic illness in modern medicine is basically the equivalent of showing up to a raging house fire?
Right.
Seeing the firemen battling the blaze and then deciding to just, arrest the firemen because they're always at the scene of the crime.
Yeah, we blame the responders.
Exactly. We artificially remove them, and then we just stand around looking confused while the house burns to the ground.
It's crazy.
Today, we are completely tearing down these medical dogmas that we've been sold for, honestly, decades.
It really is a profound shift in perspective. I mean, when you look at the landscape of modern health right now,
Which is pretty bleak.
very bleak. Chronic fatigue, hormonal collapse, metabolic disorders. We've been conditioned to fight the body's natural adaptations rather than asking, what triggered the adaptation in the first place.
Right, what started the fire? Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are unpacking a massive, really rapid-fire clinical session from health researcher Gary Brecka.
And it is dense.
So dense. The source material covers his answers to the 16 most common yet super complex health questions he encounters. We're talking about decoding genetic mutations, repairing a destroyed gut, restoring free testosterone without pharmaceuticals.
Reversing type 2 diabetes naturally.
Yeah, and the actual cellular mechanics of the best biohacks on the planet.
The sheer volume of information in this source is staggering. But if you look closely at all 16 of these distinct questions, a brilliant unifying thesis emerges.
Okay, lay it out for us.
The fundamental argument here is that modern humans are rarely suffering from a pharmaceutical deficiency.
Right.
Like, we are not sick because we lack a synthetic drug. We are sick because we are profoundly nutrient deficient and at the exact same time, environmentally inflamed.
Okay, let's unpack this because we really need to challenge the standard mindset here. If you're listening to this, how often have you had a symptom, let's say chronic brain fog or joint pain, and your immediate thought is, oh, I need an ibuprofen or I need another cup of coffee?
Exactly. We almost never ask, what raw material is my cellular machinery actually missing that is causing this malfunction?
Yeah, we treat the human body like it's this poorly designed machine that constantly makes mistakes.
And the source material vehemently pushes back on that idea. The human body is a highly evolved, sophisticated biological system. It knows precisely how to heal itself, provided it has the specific molecular building blocks to do so.
But those building blocks are missing.
Right. The crisis we face is that those building blocks have been completely stripped out of our soil, our water, and our food supply.
But having the building blocks sitting on your kitchen counter doesn't mean anything if your body's delivery system is broken, right?
Absolutely not.
Like, you can swallow the most expensive, organic, bioavailable supplements in the world, but if your internal transport mechanism is shattered, you are literally just creating really expensive urine.
Yeah, you're just flushing it away, which means we have to start at the absolute foundation of human health.
The gut.
The gastrointestinal tract. It's the gatekeeper to the bloodstream.
Right.
The biological border control.
So in the source material, one of the first things Brecka is asked about is colostrum. And people wonder, is it a fad or is it foundational?
Right.
And he makes it incredibly clear. If you have any form of gastrointestinal distress gas, bloating, severe cramping, chronic diarrhea, or, the very common leaky gut syndrome, colostrum is an absolute powerhouse.
He mentions he drinks natural raw colostrum himself, though you can totally get it in high-quality capsules.
But I want to dig into the mechanics of this because why this specific liquid? Like, what is it actually doing?
To understand the power of colostrum, we have to look at its evolutionary purpose. I mean, colostrum is not a human-engineered supplement.
No, not at all.
It is the very first form of milk produced by the mammary glands of mammals immediately following the birth of a newborn.
Right, and a newborn infant comes into the world with a highly permeable, essentially open gut lining, right?
Exactly. And colostrum is biologically programmed to rush in, seal that highly permeable lining, and transfer critical immunoglobulins.
Specifically immunoglobulin G, right?
Yes, to basically kickstart the infant's naive immune system.
So when an adult with gut damage takes bovine colostrum, they are essentially hijacking that ancient biological mechanism.
They are.
Because let's talk about what leaky gut actually is. I think a lot of people hear that term and think it sounds like, I don't know, alternative medicine nonsense.
Yeah, they dismiss it. But medically, it's called intestinal permeability.
And it is very real and honestly very dangerous. The lining of your intestines is astonishingly thin.
Right, it is. It's composed of a single layer of epithelial cells, just one layer.
Wow.
And these cells are held together by complex protein structures called tight junctions. Think of them like shoelaces pulling the cells tightly together so nothing slips between them.
Okay, I love that analogy. But the modern diet, especially things containing glyphosate, heavy pesticides, highly processed emulsifiers, it acts like a pair of scissors on those shoelaces.
That's exactly what it does. It triggers a protein called zonulin, which literally unbinds those tight junctions.
Which leads to a catastrophic breach of border control.
A massive breach. When those tight junctions open up, microscopic gaps form in your intestinal wall,
Yeah.
and suddenly massive undigested food proteins, bacterial endotoxins,
Environmental pathogens.
yeah, they all just escape the digestive tube and leak directly into the systemic bloodstream.
And your immune system, which is sitting right there, sees these floating food particles and endotoxins not as nutrition, but as hostile foreign invaders.
Right, it doesn't recognize a half-digested piece of gluten.
So it launches a massive systemic inflammatory attack. And that's why you get the brain fog, the joint pain, the sudden food allergies, the extreme bloating.
Your immune system is waging war inside your own bloodstream.
It's terrifying when you think about it. So how does colostrum actually patch those holes?
Well, the growth factors and immunoglobulins in the colostrum essentially act as biological spackle and command signals. They bind to the inflamed tissue, neutralize the invading pathogens right there locally, and then they stimulate the epithelial cells to regenerate and tighten those crucial junctions back up. It restores the barrier function.
That makes perfect sense. So once we have that barrier secured, the source material points us toward the actual raw materials we should be passing through that barrier.
The bricks to build a house.
Exactly. And for the vegans and vegetarians listening to this, finding nutrient-dense, complete foods is a massive challenge.
It really is.
But Brecka highlights shelled hemp seeds as a critical addition to the diet.
Yeah, he classifies shelled hemp seeds as one of the most potent foundational foods available. He notes that they are arguably the highest protein source in the plant kingdom.
But beyond just the protein, it's the lipid profile that makes them exceptional, right?
Oh, absolutely. They are densely packed with highly bioavailable omega-3 fatty acids, specifically gamma-linolenic acid.
Which is a potent systemic anti-inflammatory.
Precisely. And practically speaking, they are incredibly versatile. You don't have to choke down a weird powder.
No, the source suggests you can just saute them to crisp them up, toss them over a salad, or stir them into a yogurt base.
Super easy. But if you aren't strictly plant-based, there is an even older, more primal foundational food highlighted here.
Homemade bone marrow broth.
Yes. Bone broth is heavily emphasized in this material, particularly for its utility in fasting protocols.
Right, because someone asked him if it's safe for breaking a fast, and he confirms it is ideal. He actually refers to it as one of the least expensive, most effective health hacks in existence.
I want to focus on why it's the ultimate fast breaker. Because, when you've been fasting for 18, 24, or 36 hours, your body has gone into a state of autophagy.
It's cleaning out dead cells, sweeping the system.
Yeah, and your digestive enzymes are completely dormant. They're asleep.
So the worst thing you can do is suddenly hit your gut with a massive steak or a complex carbohydrate meal.
Exactly. A heavy meal forces the dormant pancreas and gallbladder into overdrive. It causes severe gastrointestinal distress and abruptly halts all those cellular repair processes.
But bone broth, conversely, requires virtually zero digestive effort.
Because the prolonged simmering of the bones and marrow, it breaks down the complex collagen matrices into highly absorbable amino acids.
Primarily glycine, proline, and glutamine, right?
Yes. And glutamine is the primary fuel source for those enterocyte cells we just talked about in the gut lining.
So you're literally feeding the barrier itself.
You are. Furthermore, the gut absorbs these pre-digested nutrients passively. You get profound cellular hydration from the deep mineral profile of the marrow and a pure influx of structural proteins.
And all without shocking the dormant digestive system.
Right.
But we have to draw a hard line here because the source material is very specific about this. We are talking about pure, grass-fed, grass-finished bone broth.
Yes, either homemade or from high-quality organic brands like Kettle and Fire.
We are absolutely not talking about those little yellow bouillon cubes sitting on the supermarket shelf.
The distinction there is critical, and it ties back directly to our core thesis of environmental inflammation.
How so?
Because commercial bouillon cubes are a masterclass in chemical deception. They contain almost zero actual structural protein or collagen.
Just jump.
Worse than junk. They are tightly compressed blocks of monosodium glutamate, maltodextrin, artificial flavorings, and chemical binders.
All designed to just mimic the taste of chicken or beef.
Exactly. While providing none of the biological utility, you are essentially drinking a mug of neurotoxins and inflammatory agents.
Which is the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. So assuming we have a healed gut and we are bringing in these high-quality raw materials, we need to talk about the actual bricks of the human body.
The amino acids.
Right, because gym culture and diet marketing have completely brainwashed us with the word protein.
Oh, completely.
You see high proteins slapped on cookies, cereals, shakes. But the source material draws a massive distinction between protein and amino acids.
And this is a biochemical misunderstanding that derails so many people's health journeys. As Brecka states, amino acids are not proteins. They are the microscopic building blocks of proteins.
I think people assume that, when you eat a chicken breast, that chicken muscle just magically turns into human muscle.
Right, like Lego blocks snapping together.
But that's not how the biology works at all. Your body cannot utilize an intact chicken protein.
No, it has to dump massive amounts of hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes to dismantle that chicken protein into its individual amino acids.
And only then can it absorb them, float them through the bloodstream, and reassemble them into specific human proteins.
And the complexity of that reassembly is where the concept of essential amino acids comes into play.
Because there are 20 standard amino acids.
Right. But 8 of them are classified as essential. And in biology, essential means the human body lacks the metabolic pathways to synthesize them on its own.
So you have to acquire them through your diet.
You must. If you are lacking even a single essential amino acid, the entire protein synthesis pathway comes to a grinding halt.
I want to push back on the gym culture mindset here for a second, because people hear protein synthesis and they immediately think, well, I don't care about getting huge biceps, so I don't really need to worry about my amino acid intake.
That is a dangerous oversimplification.
Yeah.
And the source material explicitly counters this. Muscle tissue is just one type of protein.
Wow.
Amino acids build your natural killer cells, which are the frontline soldiers of your immune system.
They construct your red blood cells, which transport oxygen to every organ.
They form the enzymes that digest your food and the neurotransmitters that regulate your mood.
So if you are amino acid deficient, you are not just losing muscle mass. Your immune system is failing, your blood is weakening, and your neurochemistry is literally collapsing.
Which is why Brecka recommends a supplement called Perfect Amino by Body Health.
Right. He notes that a single serving gives you the biological equivalent of 28 to 30 grams of whey protein. But here is the massive advantage.
It has almost 0 calories and it does not broke fast.
Okay, stop right there. How is it possible to get the equivalent of a chicken breast without the calories?
Because you are bypassing the digestive dismantling process entirely.
Ah, right.
A chicken breast has calories because your body has to burn energy to break the complex tissue down, sort out the aminos, and deal with the biological waste.
But the supplement provides the 8 essential amino acids in their free, fully isolated form.
Exactly. They pass directly through the gut lining and into the bloodstream instantly. They require no digestive energy and produce 0 nitrogen waste.
Let's talk about that nitrogen waste, because that perfectly explains why Brecka goes after BCAAs in this Q&A.
Branched-chain amino acids.
They're the holy grail of the fitness industry. Everyone is drinking neon-colored BCAAs out of their shaker bottles. But Brecka says he is not a fan. He calls them an imperfect protein.
And he's right. BCAAs typically consist of just 3 amino acids: leucine, isoleucine, and valine.
Okay.
Now, while leucine is the primary trigger for the MTO pathway, which is the biological switch that turns on muscle building, it cannot finish the job alone.
It's like having a foreman at a construction site yelling, "Build the house," but he only has 3 types of materials.
Yeah, he's missing the roof tiles, the plumbing, and the wiring.
That's a great way to put it.
If the MTO pathway is triggered by leucine, but the other 5 essential amino acids are missing from the bloodstream, the body cannot complete the protein structure.
The synthesis just fails halfway through.
It fails. And when these incomplete amino acids break down, they release ammonia into the system.
Ammonia, like the cleaner.
Basically, it's
Right.
highly toxic. The liver has to frantically convert that toxic ammonia into urea, which then heavily taxes the kidneys to filter it out.
Wow. So taking massive doses of BCAAs while lacking the full spectrum of essential aminos doesn't just fail to build tissue.
It actively burdens your renal system with toxic metabolic waste.
That is a total paradigm shift for anyone buying those BCAA powders. You must have the full spectrum of all 8 essential aminos, or you're just creating expensive, kidney-taxing waste.
You're doing more harm than good.
But let's take this a step deeper. We've got a healed gut. We've flooded the bloodstream with the perfect, complete, essential amino acids. The raw materials are ready.
Right.
But I'm looking at Brecka's notes on genetics, and it seems like having the perfect bricks doesn't matter if your body's internal architect is trying to read a damaged blueprint.
This is arguably the most vital, actionable revelation in the entire source material. We are moving from the raw materials to the genetic instructions.
We need to talk about the MTHFR and COMT gene mutations. And I know gene mutations sounds like a rare sci-fi concept.
It's not rare at all.
No, Brecka points out that these are incredibly common polymorphisms that dictate how your entire physiological system operates. Let's start with MTHFR. What exactly is failing in the body if you have this mutation?
If you carry the MTHFR genetic mutation, your body possesses a severely compromised ability, and in some cases, a complete inability to metabolize standard folate and, more specifically, synthetic folic acid.
Let's define the biochemistry here, because this is wild. What is methylation?
At a cellular level, methylation is a biochemical process where a methyl group, which is simply one carbon atom attached to 3 hydrogen atoms, is transferred from one molecule to another.
Okay, so like a handoff.
Right. Think of it as a biological spark plug. This transfer of a methyl group is what turns genes on and off, repairs DNA, clears toxins out of the liver, and synthesizes critical neurotransmitters.
And to make those spark plugs fire, your body requires raw folate.
Yes.
But here is the massive historical trap we've fallen into. Back in 1998, the FDA mandated that synthetic folic acid be heavily fortified into our food supply.
Into enriched breads, cereals, flours, and standard multivitamins.
Right, to prevent neural tube defects in pregnancies.
And the intention was noble, but the biochemical reality is catastrophic for millions of people. Because synthetic folic acid is biologically inert. The body must convert it through multiple enzymatic steps into a usable form. The MTHFR gene provides the instructions for the final enzyme in that conversion process.
So if you have the mutation, that enzyme is defective.
Exactly.
So you're consuming all this fortified folic acid from your cereal and your basic multivitamin, but your body can't convert it. It just builds up in the blood like a massive traffic jam.
A huge backlog.
And worse, that unconverted folic acid actually blocks the cellular receptor sites, preventing any real natural folate from getting in.
You are literally starving at a cellular level while swimming in synthetic vitamins.
That's insane. What are the systemic consequences of that?
They are devastating. Without that final methylated folate, the entire methylation cycle crashes. Homocysteine, which is a highly inflammatory amino acid in the blood, begins to skyrocket because it can't be recycled.
DNA repair halts. Neurotransmitter production plummets.
It's a system-wide failure.
So what is the fix? If I'm listening to this and I check my genes or my blood work and realize I have the MTHFR mutation, what is the actionable protocol?
You must entirely bypass the broken conversion engine. The source material is emphatic here. You must seek out a methylated multivitamin.
Okay.
You need to look at the supplement panel and ensure it contains 5-methylfolate, often listed as 5-MTHF.
Brecka mentions his clinical line 10x Optimize uses this, but he clearly states you don't need his specific brand. You just need to ensure the label says 5-MTHF, not folic acid.
The clinical data supporting this is profound. The source cites research demonstrating that by simply switching a patient from standard folic acid to 5-methylfolate, they observed up to a 10-fold increase in the intracellular availability of this crucial micronutrient.
10 times the availability, just by giving the body the pre-converted form.
Because you are handing the cellular machinery the exact puzzle piece it needs, ready to be utilized instantly.
Which naturally brings up the mental health aspect of this. In the Q&A, someone asks Brecka if mental health conditions like ADHD, ADD, and severe depression are linked to these genetic deficiencies.
And his response is incredibly nuanced. He's very careful to delineate between correlation and causation.
Right. He states clearly, I am not saying that your ADHD is caused by the gene mutation, but it very well could be.
I want to break down why that is. If methylation is responsible for synthesizing neurotransmitters, and your methylation cycle is broken because of this MTHFR mutation,
Your brain literally lacks the physical raw materials to manufacture dopamine and serotonin.
Exactly. The psychiatric community often treats ADHD and depression purely as chemical imbalances requiring synthetic reuptake inhibitors or stimulants.
Right, they just give you a pill to mask the symptom.
But if the root cause of the imbalance is an inability to process the baseline vitamins needed to build those chemicals in the first place, treating it with a pharmaceutical is merely masking a structural deficit.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Exactly. When clinicians introduce methylated vitamins to these individuals, the body often resumes natural neurotransmitter production, and the psychiatric symptoms frequently abate.
The physiological deficiency was driving the psychological symptom.
Precisely.
This brings us to the second and arguably more intense genetic mutation discussed, COMT.
The COMT gene polymorphism. COMT stands for catechol-methyltransferase.
Okay, let's define the jargon here. What is a catecholamine, and what does this specific enzyme do with them?
Catecholamines are your primary fight-or-flight neurotransmitters. We were talking about dopamine, epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and norepinephrine.
The heavy hitters.
Right. When you experience stress, excitement, or danger, these chemicals flood into the synaptic clefts in your brain. They create a highly wakeful, hypervigilant, focused state.
They are the gas pedal for your nervous system.
Precisely. But once the stressful event has passed, the body needs to hit the brakes.
Naturally.
The COMT gene provides the instructions to build an enzyme whose sole job is to act like a biological vacuum cleaner. It sweeps into the synaptic cleft, breaks down the leftover catecholamines, and clears them out.
Allowing your brain to return to a baseline state of calm.
Yes.
So if you have a COMT mutation, that vacuum cleaner is broken.
The enzyme is sluggish or highly inefficient.
So the adrenaline and dopamine just sit there in the synapse. The stressful event is over. Maybe it was just a tough email from your boss, but chemically your brain thinks a lion is still chasing you for hours, sometimes even days afterward.
The off switch gets stuck. The individual remains in a state of heightened sympathetic nervous system arousal.
Which manifests clinically as chronic anxiety.
Yes, chronic anxiety, racing thoughts at night, an inability to wind down, and chronic exhaustion.
Because the body is constantly burning energy in a state of artificial danger.
Exactly.
That is an absolute revelation for anyone listening to this dealing with chronic generalized anxiety, to realize it might not be a psychological failing, but an enzymatic backlog.
It's incredibly validating for a lot of patients.
So how do we speed up the vacuum cleaner? How do we help the COMT enzyme clear those chemicals?
The enzyme requires specific cofactors to function, primarily B vitamins. The source material specifies that individuals with a COMT mutation highly benefit from a robust B vitamin complex.
Any specific kind?
More specifically, highly bioavailable forms of vitamin B12, such as hydroxycobalamin or methylcobalamin.
Okay.
These act as the biological grease that speeds up the COMT enzyme, allowing it to efficiently clear the lingering fight-or-flight chemicals and restore calm to the nervous system.
It's all interconnected chemistry. We have the gut absorbing the aminos, the MTHFR gene utilizing methylated vitamins to build the neurotransmitters, and the COMT gene using B12 to clear them out.
It's a beautiful system when it works.
But once these genetic blueprints are read, the body has to coordinate all this activity globally, and it does that through its master communication network, the endocrine system, hormones.
Hormones are the systemic command signals. And when the endocrine system collapses, the downstream effects are catastrophic.
The source material focuses heavily here on men's health, specifically the epidemic of low testosterone. Brecka cites the 2018 Journal of American Urology, specifically the Section 13 guidelines.
Yes.
And the way they classify low testosterone should completely alter how men view this issue.
Because the general public views low testosterone primarily as a cosmetic or libido issue, loss of muscle mass, fatigue, decreased sex drive.
Right. But the urological guidelines classify low testosterone as a direct independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease.
This is crucial.
Wait, let's define the causality there, because usually we associate heart attacks with high blood pressure or bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
How is a lack of testosterone directly damaging the heart?
Because the cardiovascular system is highly dependent on androgens to maintain the integrity of the blood vessels.
Okay.
Testosterone plays a crucial role in endothelial function, which is the ability of your blood vessels to dilate and contract smoothly.
It also regulates red blood cell production.
Yeah, it does. In fact, the source notes that low testosterone is a primary driver of anemia. When testosterone drops, the blood vessels become stiff, inflammation rises, bone mineral density collapses, and the heart has to work exponentially harder.
Which explains why the knee-jerk reaction for so many men in their 30s and 40s is to run to an anti-aging clinic and immediately jump on TRT testosterone replacement therapy.
Creams, injections, pellets.
Yeah, taking exogenous hormones. Exogenous meaning synthesized outside the body. But Brecka throws up a massive caution sign regarding this approach.
He strongly advises against using exogenous testosterone as a first-line intervention. The human endocrine system operates on a negative feedback loop.
What does that mean in this context?
The hypothalamus and the pituitary gland in the brain monitor the amount of testosterone in the blood. If they detect high levels, because you are injecting it from the outside, they send a signal to the testicles to completely shut down natural production.
It's like I always say about living on credit cards. It feels incredible at first. You have all this external spending power, your energy is up, you feel great.
Right.
But behind the scenes, your own natural income stream has gone dormant, your internal factories have been boarded up. Eventually, if you ever stop using the credit cards, you crash into severe bankruptcy because your body literally forgot how to produce the hormone itself.
A brilliant analogy.
Hmm.
And the atrophy of the natural testicular production is often incredibly difficult to reverse. Brecka states emphatically, it is always better to be high on your own supply than to take something from outside your body.
So how do we fix the internal income stream? How do we stimulate endogenous and internal production?
It requires diagnostic precision. He advises pulling a comprehensive hormone panel to understand where the assembly line is broken.
Because it's not always the testicles' fault, right?
Often the testicles are perfectly capable of producing testosterone, but the brain isn't sending the signal.
That would be luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, the brain's signaling messengers.
Correct. The HPTA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis. If LH and FSH are low, you can stimulate those upstream signals to wake the testicles back up.
What if the signal is fine?
Alternatively, the issue might be a deficiency in precursors. The body needs DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, a prohormone produced by the adrenal glands, which is the foundational raw material the body uses to synthesize both testosterone and estrogen.
So supplementing with DHEA can provide the necessary substrate for natural production.
Yes.
And there's one more massive roadblock he mentions, SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. What is this, and why is it ruining guys' testosterone levels?
SHBG is a protein produced by the liver that binds tightly to sex hormones in the bloodstream.
I picture it like a biological taxi cab. The testosterone gets into the taxi, but the doors lock, and it can't get out to actually do its job at the cellular level.
That's exactly how it functions. You could have robust total testosterone production, but if your SHBG levels are excessively high, all that testosterone is bound and biologically inactive.
It cannot bind to the androgen receptors in the muscle or the brain.
Exactly.
So the key isn't necessarily making more testosterone, it's freeing up the testosterone you already have by lowering that SHBG protein through diet, targeted supplements, and fixing insulin resistance.
It's about optimizing the network, not just flooding the system with synthetic chemicals.
But our hormone networks are incredibly fragile, and they are constantly under assault from environmental toxins. Which leads us to an incredibly jarring part of the Q&A regarding something we all use every single day, deodorant, antiperspirant.
The source material takes a very hard stance on the necessity of aluminum-free deodorant.
Brecka's explanation of this genuinely made me throw away my standard antiperspirant. The active ingredient in almost all commercial antiperspirants is aluminum.
Yes, it is a heavy metal designed to literally plug the sweat gland so you remain dry.
And we need to look at the anatomy of where we are applying this heavy metal every single morning. The axillary region, the armpit.
Right, it's not just regular skin.
Far from it. The upper axillary region is one of the most critical drainage hubs in the human body.
It is heavily populated with axillary lymph nodes, complex lymphatic drainage ducts, and massive vascular blood flow.
The lymphatic system is essentially the body's sewage and filtration network.
And you are taking a toxic heavy metal, applying it directly over the primary filtration nodes, and doing so in extreme anatomical proximity to sensitive adipose tissue, specifically breast tissue.
Which is terrifying.
The body is notoriously inefficient at methylating and clearing aluminum. It acts as an endocrine disruptor, it generates massive oxidative stress, and the body tends to sequester these unresolved heavy metals in nearby fat tissue to protect vital organs.
putting a heavy metal directly over your lymphatic drainage day after day, decade after decade, just to avoid a little underarm sweat. I mean, Brecka points out the downstream consequences of this are severe.
It is the textbook definition of environmental inflammation. We are actively poisoning our own biological filtration systems.
Let's shift from a toxic element to a highly beneficial one that almost everyone is deficient in, vitamin D3. But the source material highlights a critical synergy here that most people completely miss when they supplement.
Vitamin D3 is frequently misunderstood. Despite the name, it is not actually a vitamin. It functions as a potent steroid hormone within the body, regulating over 1,000 different genes.
Brecka recommends a robust dose, about 5,000 IUs daily, but he drops a massive caveat. You absolutely must pair that D3 with vitamin K2, specifically the MK7 variant.
Yes.
Why is taking D3 alone potentially dangerous?
Because of how D3 interacts with calcium. One of the primary functions of vitamin D3 is to drastically increase the intestinal absorption of calcium into the bloodstream. It opens the gates.
Okay.
But D3 is blind. It brings the calcium into the vascular system, but it has no ability to direct where that calcium goes.
So you have all this free-floating calcium in the blood. If left unchecked, where does it end up?
It precipitates into the soft tissues. It deposits into the kidneys, creating kidney stones, and most dangerously, it embeds into the endothelial walls of the arteries.
Leading to severe arterial calcification and heart disease.
Exactly.
Which is where vitamin K2 steps in as the biological traffic cop.
Vitamin K2 activates two incredibly specific proteins. First, it activates matrix glycoprotein, or MGP, which acts like a biological broom, actively sweeping calcium out of the arterial walls and soft tissues.
Wow. And the second?
Secondly, it activates osteocalcin, a protein that takes that free-floating calcium and firmly glues it into the bone matrix where it belongs.
So D3 pulls the calcium into the body, and K2 ensures it builds your skeleton instead of clogging your arteries. It is a non-negotiable synergistic pairing.
Completely non-negotiable.
So we've covered the gut, we've fixed the genetics, and we've stabilized the hormones. But what happens when all of these foundational systems fail concurrently over decades?
We arrive at the metabolic crisis.
We are talking about the massive epidemics of clinical obesity and type 2 diabetes.
This is where standard allopathic medicine has become increasingly aggressive and, in many ways, fundamentally detached from the root cause of the illness.
Extremely detached. The source material addresses the explosion of weight loss surgeries, bariatric surgeries, gastric bypass, and the newer wave of GLP-1 and GIP receptor agonists, medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro.
And Brecka immediately pumps the brakes on all of this. He advises patients to stop and ask the most fundamental question: why are you obese? And why are you diabetic in the first place?
He issues a stark warning against utilizing surgical amputations of the stomach or synthetic incretin hormones to simply force caloric restriction.
His quote encapsulates the philosophy perfectly. You cannot chemically alter a really, really poor diet and sleep schedule.
I want to pause and advocate for the listener here who might be struggling with severe weight issues, because it is incredibly frustrating to be told, just eat right and sleep more.
It is.
When you are biologically obese, you feel an insatiable, ravenous hunger. Your body is screaming at you to eat. Isn't it incredibly difficult to just out-willpower that biological drive?
It is nearly impossible to out-willpower it, and the source material deeply validates that struggle. It is not a moral failing or a lack of discipline. It is a profound physiological trap.
Brecka describes the modern environment as a toxic soup.
Let's break down that toxic soup. Our cellular environment is constantly bathed in endocrine-disrupting chemicals. We are consuming produce drenched in glyphosate, herbicides, and pesticides that decimate our gut microbiome.
And the food itself, the ultra-processed food that makes up 70% of the standard diet, is calorically dense but nutritionally barren.
This is the exact mechanism of the modern obesity trap. You can consume a meal consisting of 3,000 calories of highly processed, chemically engineered carbohydrates and industrial seed oils.
The physical volume stretches your stomach.
But because the food is completely devoid of essential amino acids, bioavailable vitamins, and trace minerals, your cellular machinery remains in a state of absolute starvation.
Your body registers the massive influx of calories, but the cells are screaming, where are the actual building blocks?
Precisely. The biological sensors in the brain detect the nutrient deficiency and trigger the release of ghrelin, the hunger hormone.
The body forces you to keep eating.
Yes, driving you into a massive caloric surplus, desperately searching for microscopic nutrients that do not exist in the processed food you're consuming. You are simultaneously drowning in calories and starving to death at a cellular level.
That fundamentally changes how we view the obesity epidemic. It is a desperate biological search for nutrition in a barren landscape.
And treating that by surgically shrinking the stomach or paralyzing the gastric emptying process with the GLP-1 drug does absolutely nothing to resolve the underlying cellular starvation.
It simply forces the starving body to eat even less.
Exactly.
Which naturally brings us to the downstream effect of this metabolic collapse: type 2 diabetes. The prevailing medical dogma for decades has been that diabetes is chronic, progressive, and essentially a life sentence of escalating medications.
But Brecka states unequivocally that the belief that diabetes cannot be reversed is patently false.
He notes that clinical teams, such as those he works with at 10x Health, routinely help patients safely titrate off their diabetic medications and completely reverse the pathology.
Routinely.
How? What is the biological mechanism to reverse insulin resistance?
It requires an aggressive, fundamental alteration of the metabolic environment. You have to empty the overflowing cellular sinks. The body is toxic with excess glucose.
Right.
The primary intervention involves ketogenic resets, severely restricting carbohydrate intake to force the body to exhaust its glycogen stores and switch over to oxidizing fat for fuel.
You have to lower the overall glycemic profile of the diet, completely eliminate the inflammatory industrial seed oils that are stiffening the cell membranes, and prioritize profound hydration to help the kidneys filter out the metabolic waste.
But he also offers an incredible natural intervention for managing blood glucose during this healing phase, the berberine biohack.
For individuals struggling to control massive blood sugar spikes, he advocates for berberine. I look into berberine because of this Q&A, and the biochemistry is astonishing.
It really is.
It acts almost identically to metformin. Metformin is a glucophage. It is the frontline pharmaceutical prescribed to almost every type 2 diabetic on Earth to suppress glucose production in the liver and force the cells to become more sensitive to insulin.
And berberine accomplishes a remarkably parallel biochemical task. It is a naturally occurring alkaloid extracted from the roots and stems of specific plants.
Okay.
The primary mechanism of action is the activation of an enzyme called AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase.
AMPK is essentially the cellular fuel gauge, right?
Correct. When berberine activates AMPK, it signals to the cell that energy is low. The cell responds by drastically increasing insulin sensitivity, pulling massive amounts of glucose out of the bloodstream, and simultaneously inhibiting the liver from manufacturing new glucose.
It is providing the exact metabolic heavy lifting of a pharmaceutical glucophage, but utilizing a natural plant alkaloid.
It's helping the body clear the sugar load organically.
And speaking of clearing sugar loads, Brecka drops an incredibly simple, completely free exercise hack that anyone can do to stabilize their metabolism.
This is one of my favorites.
He states that taking 3 15-minute walks per day, specifically timed right after your meals, is vastly superior for your metabolism than taking one grueling 45-minute walk.
The physiological logic behind this is brilliant. It utilizes the mechanical function of the muscle tissue to bypass the broken insulin system.
So?
When you consume a meal, your blood glucose levels inevitably spike. In a normal, sedentary scenario, your pancreas must flood the bloodstream with insulin to act as a key, unlocking the cell doors to force that toxic excess sugar out of the blood and into the fat cells.
For a diabetic, those cell doors are rusted shut. That's insulin resistance.
But walking changes the rules of the game entirely. When you engage in light, sustained cardiovascular movement right after eating, your leg muscles demand immediate ATP energy. The mechanical contraction of the muscle tissue forces specialized receptors, called GLUT4 receptors, to rise to the surface of the muscle cell.
And these receptors can pull sugar out of the blood without needing insulin.
Exactly. They act like vacuum hoses, soaking up the postprandial glucose spike directly from the bloodstream to fuel the walking mechanism.
You dramatically blunt the blood sugar spike, and you spare the pancreas from having to produce a massive surge of insulin.
Doing this 3 times a day, post-meals, completely flattens the glycemic curve of your entire day.
It is such an elegant solution. You are just utilizing the human machine the way it was evolutionarily designed to be used.
Exactly.
Which perfectly sets up our next major shift. Because if we're challenging the standard medical approach to obesity and diabetes, we absolutely must tear down the most entrenched, fiercely guarded medical dogma of the last half-century.
We need to talk about heart health.
And we need to talk about cholesterol.
This is the paradigm shift that encounters the most friction because entire pharmaceutical empires are built upon the current model.
Brecka provides a 30-second analogy that completely shatters the standard view of heart disease. He calls it the cholesterol fireman myth.
It's a great analogy.
He says, imagine there is a massive house fire. The firemen show up in their trucks to put the fire out. In fact, every single time there is a fire in the city, the firemen are there.
Right.
But nobody in their right mind would conclude that the firemen started the fire.
It is a devastatingly simple, yet completely accurate analogy for cardiovascular pathology. In this scenario, cholesterol is the fireman.
Let's break this down for the listener who was just sitting in their doctor's office last week, looking at a lipid panel and being told, your LDL cholesterol is too high, we need to put you on a statin to lower it, or you're going to have a heart attack. What is actually happening inside the artery?
The standard medical model looks at the plaque clogging an artery, sees that it is composed of cholesterol, and concludes that the cholesterol must be the primary culprit. Lower the cholesterol, stop the plaque.
But this ignores the root cause, the fire.
And the fire is endothelial damage.
Let's look at the anatomy of the blood vessel, the endothelium.
The inside lining of your blood vessels is called the endothelium. It is coated with a microscopic, highly protective layer called the endothelial glycocalyx. Think of it like a pristine, non-stick Teflon coating that allows blood to flow smoothly.
But the modern diet destroys that Teflon coating.
When you consume massive amounts of refined sugars, highly processed carbohydrates, and industrial seed oils, you create chronic hyperinsulinemia and severe systemic inflammation.
Okay.
These inflammatory agents and oxidized sugar molecules act like microscopic shards of glass tearing through your bloodstream. They literally scrape, damage, and tear the glycocalyx and the endothelial wall.
That is the fire. The structural integrity of the blood vessel is failing.
And the body, sensing this catastrophic structural damage, responds by sending its emergency repair crew, cholesterol.
Specifically, low-density lipoproteins, or LDL.
Yes. Cholesterol is biologically engineered to act as a spackle. It rushes to the site of the micro tears and patches the damaged arterial wall to prevent the blood vessel from rupturing.
The firemen have arrived to put out the fire and shore up the house.
But here's the tragic flaw in the modern lifestyle. The patient doesn't change their diet. They keep consuming the sugar, the seed oils, the toxins.
So inflammation continues to tear the arterial wall.
Exactly. So the body sends more cholesterol to patch the new damage.
Layer after layer of spackle.
Eventually, macrophages arrive to clean up the mess. They gorge on the oxidized cholesterol, turning into foam cells, and a massive hardened plaque forms, severely restricting the artery.
And standard medicine looks at that plaque, points to the cholesterol and says, see, the cholesterol clogged the artery. Take the statin drug to artificially cripple your liver's ability to produce cholesterol.
Which is the exact equivalent of arresting the fireman while the arsonist is still throwing gasoline on the house. You are removing the body's repair mechanism while allowing the underlying inflammatory damage to run rampant.
Brecka makes it incredibly clear. Instead of panicking over a standard lipid panel and the mere presence of cholesterol, you should be demanding that your doctor test for the actual markers of the fire.
The true markers of cardiovascular risk are inflammatory. You need to measure HSCRP, high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, which measures systemic inflammation.
You need to check homocysteine levels, which, as we discussed earlier, relates directly to poor methylation and vascular damage.
And critically, you must measure your fasting insulin and hemoglobin A1C to determine how much oxidized sugar is tearing up the endothelium. If the fire is out, the cholesterol has no reason to stick to the walls.
This theme of deep cellular inflammation carries right into his next point about the fats we consume. He argues that almost every modern human is critically deficient in omega-3 fatty acids and overflowing with omega-6s.
The lipid composition of our cellular membranes dictates our systemic inflammation levels. Evolutionarily, the human body was designed to operate on a roughly 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids.
Omega-3s being your anti-inflammatory fats found in wild-caught fish, algae, and grass-fed meats, and omega-6s being pro-inflammatory, primarily found today in industrial seed oils like canola, soybean, and corn oil.
Right.
But where does the modern dietary ratio actually sit?
Brecka notes that due to the saturation of industrial seed oils in virtually all processed foods and restaurant cooking, many people are operating at an astonishing ratio of 45-to-1.
45 times more inflammatory omega-6 than anti-inflammatory omega-3.
Exactly. At that ratio, the arachidonic acid pathway is hyperactivated. The body is in a constant raging state of low-grade systemic inflammation. Joint pain, brain fog, and endothelial damage become the default state.
45-to-1. Your cells are practically soaking in gasoline.
To extinguish that, he recommends heavily supplementing with high-quality DHA and EPA fish oils, or his personal preference, black seed oil, which contains potent compounds like thymoquinone to aggressively push that ratio back toward a balanced anti-inflammatory state.
Before we move to the final optimization phase of the deep dive, I want to touch on one specific, highly frustrating symptom that the source material addresses, because it perfectly illustrates how we overcomplicate health.
Restless leg syndrome.
Yes. Or severe nocturnal leg cramps.
Most patients and many clinicians treat this as a complex neurological mystery, often resorting to heavy pharmaceuticals like gabapentin to quiet the nervous system.
But Brecka asserts it is almost always a fundamental severe mineral deficiency or clinical dehydration at the cellular level.
We have to remember that the human nervous system is an electrical grid. Every muscle contraction, every nerve impulse operates via the exchange of microscopic, electrically charged minerals, specifically sodium, potassium, and magnesium.
The sodium-potassium pump.
Exactly. It maintains the resting voltage of the cell. But when a muscle contracts, calcium rushes into the cell to trigger the firing. To relax that muscle, magnesium must be present to act as the gatekeeper, blocking the receptor and allowing the calcium to clear out.
If you are deeply deficient in magnesium or critical trace minerals, the electrical signaling misfires catastrophically. The muscle gets stuck in a firing loop.
It twitches, it cramps, it becomes restless because it literally lacks the chemical off switch.
His protocol for this is beautifully simple. A high-quality magnesium supplement right before bed to flood the receptors and relax the nervous system, and a 1/4 teaspoon of Baja Gold sea salt in water every single morning.
And we must clarify why he specifies Baja Gold or unrefined Celtic sea salt. Standard, bright white table salt sodium chloride is a heavily processed industrial product. It has been stripped of all its trace minerals, bleached, and coated in anti-caking agents like aluminum derivatives.
More aluminum.
Unrefined mineral salt, conversely, is dried naturally from pristine oceans. It retains the broad, complex spectrum of over 70 trace minerals that the human body evolved to utilize. It restores the intricate electrolyte balance required to conduct perfect electrical impulses throughout the neuromuscular grid.
It is staggering how many complex, agonizing medical mysteries resolve when you simply give the body the elemental minerals it needs to run the electrical current.
It really is.
Which brings us to the final frontier, system optimization and biohacking. Once the gut barrier is sealed, the genes are bypassed, the hormones are communicating, and the inflammatory fires are extinguished, how do we push the human machine to its absolute peak?
The source material addresses this in 2 distinct categories: aesthetic longevity and foundational cellular energy.
Let's start with aesthetics, specifically male hair loss. Because it is a billion-dollar industry, and the debate between using topical treatments versus taking an oral pill is fierce.
Brecka establishes a very rigid boundary here. He strongly prefers topical interventions applied directly to the scalp, such as topical finasteride, ketoconazole shampoos or minoxidil, and vehemently warns against taking oral 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like oral Propecia or finasteride.
Why the hard line against the pill? From a consumer standpoint, swallowing a tiny pill every morning is infinitely easier than massaging foams and serums into your scalp.
It is easier, but the systemic biological cost is devastating. We have to look at the mechanism of action. Hair loss at the crown is primarily driven by DHT dihydrotestosterone. The 5-alpha reductase enzyme in the scalp converts normal testosterone into DHT, which then binds to the dermal papilla of the hair follicle, choking it of blood supply and causing it to miniaturize and fall out.
So the goal of the drug is to inhibit that enzyme and stop the creation of DHT.
Correct. But if you take an oral medication, you're not just suppressing DHT in the scalp. You are suppressing it systemically across the entire male body.
And while DHT might be hostile to a hair follicle, in the rest of the male physiology, DHT is the most potent critical androgen in existence.
It is the primary driver of male libido, erectile function, assertiveness, and neurological drive.
You are intentionally inducing a severe hormonal crash. You are sacrificing the engine of male vitality just to keep the paint job on the hood looking nice.
The downstream effects of systemic DHT suppression are well documented: profound erectile dysfunction, severe depression, loss of morning erections, and chronic lethargy. This is why topicals are the intelligent biohack. By applying the compound locally to the scalp, you inhibit the DHT conversion at the site of the follicle while preserving the critical systemic DHT levels circulating in the blood.
He also mentions a specific cutting-edge peptide hack for hair regeneration, GHKQ.
Copper peptides, Q being the chemical symbol for elemental copper.
He suggests using a couple peptide foam on the scalp in the mornings. How does copper regrow hair?
GHK2 is a naturally occurring human peptide that dramatically declines as we age. When applied topically, it has a profound ability to stimulate angiogenesis, the creation of new, microscopic blood vessels. It floods the dormant hair follicle with fresh oxygen and nutrients, while simultaneously reducing localized inflammation and upregulating the production of structural collagen in the scalp.
It's basically restoring the soil so the follicle can breathe again. But Brecka adds a vital reminder. Before you spend hundreds of dollars on peptides and topicals, check your foundational labs. If your thyroid gland is failing or your hormone cascade is broken, all the copper peptide in the world won't keep your hair from falling out. The foundation must be secure.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to the final, most profound question posed in the Q&A. Someone asks Brecka, out of all the incredibly expensive tech out there, the PEMF mats, the hyperbaric chambers, the cold plunges, what is the ultimate biohacking tool?
His answer strips away all the commercialization of the biohacking industry. He states that the absolute greatest biohack ever discovered is red light therapy.
But the best part of his answer is that he doesn't tell you to go drop $10,000 on a massive clinical light bed. He says the most potent application of this therapy costs exactly $0. It is simply walking outside and exposing your bare skin and eyes to natural sunlight for 15 to 20 minutes immediately upon waking.
The biochemistry of morning sunlight is miraculous. We're not talking about getting a tan. Within the first hour of sunrise, the sun emits a very specific, highly concentrated frequency of near-infrared and blue light, with virtually none of the tissue-damaging UVA or UVB rays that appear at high noon.
What happens when that specific morning light hits the body?
Two critical biological cascades occur. First, those specific wavelengths penetrate up to 5 millimeters through the skin and directly into the cells, where they interact with an enzyme in the mitochondria called cytochrome SCAC oxidase. This interaction dramatically upregulates the electron transport chain, forcing the mitochondria to produce massive amounts of ATP, pure cellular energy.
You are literally photosynthesizing energy.
In a sense, yes. Secondly, that specific blue light enters the unprotected eye and hits the melanopsin receptors on the retina. These receptors send an instantaneous electrical signal directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, the master biological clock. It halts the production of melatonin, clears the sleep inertia, spikes healthy cortisol to wake you up, and starts a 14-hour countdown timer for your body to release melatonin that evening so you can actually achieve deep, restorative sleep.
You are setting the entire circadian rhythm of the human machine just by standing in the light. So, to synthesize this massive journey we have been on for the last hour, we have meticulously unpacked 16 highly distinct, deeply complex questions from Gary Brecka's clinical perspective. We started in the microscopic tight junctions of the gut, we rewrote the genetic blueprints of methylation, we freed up bound hormones, we reversed the metabolic starvation of diabetes, and we utilized light to power the mitochondria.
And despite the complexity, the unifying theorem across every single physiological system we discussed is remarkably clear and deeply encouraging. The human body is the most advanced, relentless, self-healing mechanism in the known universe.
If you simply provide the machine with the raw, elemental materials it evolved to utilize over millions of years, the complete amino acids, the methylated vitamins, the unrefined trace minerals, the complete fats, and the morning light, and if you actively remove the synthetic toxic blockers, the seed oils, the heavy metals, the chemical preservatives, the body will inevitably return to a state of equilibrium. It will patch the gut, it will balance the hormones, and it will extinguish the inflammatory fires.
Which leaves us with a necessary, perhaps slightly uncomfortable philosophical realization. We have spent an hour dissecting how to supplement, how to bypass genetic mutations, how to optimize ratios, and how to biohack our way back to cellular vitality.
But when you look at the totality of the solutions presented, seeking out morning sunlight, consuming pure animal proteins and marrow, utilizing unrefined sea salt, avoiding chemical deodorants, and walking after we eat every single one of these advanced biohacks is essentially just an attempt to artificially recreate the exact natural environment that our ancestors inhabited by default.
That's the irony of it all.
So here is the thought I want to leave you with today. As we spend billions of dollars and endless hours trying to optimize our biology, are we actually biohacking our way into an advanced, superhuman future? Or are we just desperately, frantically trying to simulate the primal past in a modern world that has successfully engineered nature entirely out of our daily lives?
It is a profound question to chew on.
Check your nutrient toolkits, respect your body's innate wisdom, and as always, keep asking the hard questions. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.